A gentleman recently trespassed behind the building where I work in an area where people are not permitted. He was rolling two large wooden spools and taking them toward a trailhead where several homeless people camp. We've had problems with drug trafficking, theft, trespassing, and littering, so I went out to ask him not to cut behind our building. I was irritated given that there are numerous no trespassing signs posted. When I asked him why he was ignoring them, he was defensive and told me he had permission. I told him that regardless of where or how he got the spools, he did not have permission to be back there. Our interaction was a little tense at first, but we were both polite, and he said he didn't want to cause trouble and would be on his way. He also asked me not to raise my voice and to treat him like a human being. I found this kind of sad, as I thought he probably had been treated as subhuman as many homeless people are. But I also felt justified in being assertive with anyone who trespassed there. There was also something kind of compelling about him. He was young and struggling like a previously all-American guy, but kind of coming unraveled. He had a disfiguring burn on his forehead about the size of a cell phone that was blistered and fresh. He told me he needed the wooden spools for his campsite to have a place for his lantern and other things. Apparently the burn came from him falling down while holding his lantern. He said he had been self-medicating and lost his balance. I was surprised to hear him use that phrase, but didn't pry as to why he used it. I told him to take one of the spools and roll it to the trailhead, and I would take the other. After we rolled the spools over the curb onto the path, I wished him well and returned to work, hoping he would honor my request not to trespass. A week later, an Olympia firefighter stopped by my work. He said they were trying to find out about the trails nearby, which path went where, and how to get to the different encampments. I told him some of the details of the trails and mentioned that I thought only a new guy with a big burn on his forehead was down this part of the path. The firefighter's face kind of went blank. He said, "You won't be seeing much of him anymore. He was our overdose last week. He's why I'm here, following up. We got the call, but we weren't clear on the best way to find his camp." Apparently there were 4 overdoses in one afternoon from particularly strong heroin laced with fentanyl, and he was the sole fatality. His name was Charles. He was 27 years old. He overdosed on Friday, November 2nd from mixed drug toxicity, the acute combined effects of methamphetamine, fentanyl, and heroin. You won't be seeing much of him anymore. He won't get any chance to possibly turn his life around, go through treatment, get into transitional housing, or get a fresh start. He's dead. You could say Charles took his own life. It was his fault. It was his mistake. His overdose, his drugs. But you could also say that our community helped take his life. Or at least those in our community who think letting people live under a freeway overpass while shooting heroin and doing meth is compassionate. There are those who protest enforcing laws that might have turned him in a different direction. Laws about drug use and drug possession. Laws about trespassing and squatting. Laws about nuisance crimes. Laws that might help people who can't really fend for themselves against their addiction or their mental illness or both. If I left my 9-year-old under a freeway overpass to fend for himself, our society would say that's unacceptable. I could be arrested. Yet some so-called advocates, allies, and political leaders in our community have been preaching that letting people fend for themselves, who clearly cannot fend for themselves any better than my 9-year-old, is compassionate. They should just letting them live in a tent if we'd only provide garbage service and porta potties to their encampments. Or letting them live in a doghouse that we call a tiny home and pat ourselves on the back for providing. That's somehow higher on the compassion food chain. I disagree. I worked for 10 years in psychiatric social work, crisis intervention, substance abuse treatment, serving this population. 5 of those years were as Thurston County's homeless outreach case manager, providing direct services to mentally ill and chemically addicted homeless people. From what I have seen, it is not Charles, it's our community that is headed down the wrong path.